What I say is the truth of modern women. It doesn't have to be this way. I think one day women can rise above this. But today is not that day. The better off a woman is, the worse she is for dating or marrying. The more money she has, the worst behavior she has, the worst ego, and the higher the bar of expectations is for men. The more status she has, the more she looks down upon all men, no matter how essential we are to all societies. The more children she has, that is, if she has one or more, the more ignored and left behind any man who dates her. They'll use you and give you no power or control, not worth it. The boomers in Generation X are basically dead when it comes to relationships. They're too old and not worth taking into account, frankly. They skew the data. The reality is millennials are mostly damaged and broken. They'll die alone, although most women still had kids. But Gen Z will show the real ramifications of all these female changes. My generation of men aren't looking at women. We're not approaching dating, marrying, impregnating, etc. Anything with women. Our women are the worst. They offer the least. They demand the most. They then took it a step further and chose to label us the enemy. The 21st century is just starting. It will be the era of men's changes and how we shape the landscape due to the changes women created in the 20th century. And if we look at the previous generations of women and compare them to Gen Z women and probably the future women, they won't be able to handle a world without men in their lives. Women have never had to live without men. They've always had us. But no more. And it's sad, but they won't cry because they truly regret their actions. They cry because life won't be the perfect thing they thought they deserved. Unfortunately, we live in a world that empowers women constantly and never hear anything about how men can be empowered. But guys, each time you don't approach women, don't spend money on them, don't waste time being around them, and don't acknowledge their presence. Men all around the world can empower themselves and take their freedom. Relationships used to be based on mutual trust, customs, and ideals. Men and women approached dating and relationships very differently 50 or 60 years ago. Women used to accept men with consideration and respect when they approached them. However, things have changed. The changes are immense. However, we must really consider why males no longer approach women. Why do guys shy away from women? What has changed over the years that males prefer to communicate with women differently rather than directly approaching them? Let's investigate. The 90s weren't so different from today. We just didn't have social media to put it out there for the world to see. Ditto for the 80s. For example, in the 80s, starting in middle school even, there were two kinds of parties. Those with the parents present, where some people mixed, but most males and females mostly sat it out, and when the parents were present or directly supervising. In the latter case, it generally ended up with all the good guys off by themselves with the girls all over the few jerks, Chads and Tyrones and their entourage. Frequently fights broke out amongst the girls, or sometimes the jerks would try to start stuff to be macho. Most of the good guys stopped going to parties. The point is, this is nothing new. It is all just more in the open now, and as such it may be more widespread, meaning actively participated in rather than just wishful thinking by more. I'm sure the old men back in the day knew how it really was, they just never talked about it. At least not if the wife might get word. These women don't care about men, then the men are like, okay. But when it comes to finally deciding to settle down, they want relationships, but they don't want to do the work. They want the men to make the move, to pay for the date, to plan the date, etc. Men stopped playing because women have set the game to make it easy for them at the expense of making the game harder for men. Even if we men can hit the gym, improve our career prospects, and learn valuable skills, learn self-respect, we can change all we want. But we can't change modern women, so until the women realize that they're the problem, then more and more men will continue to opt out, and then the women will have to stop and realize they're the problem. Today, approaching women nearly always results in humiliation, being called a perv, or just being ignored and socially shunned. Why? Because most males are perceived by women as predators or desperate men. They will be fine if they already know a guy and want him to contact them, but that is another matter. Yet it is simply not worthwhile for a male to approach an unidentified woman. Too many risks exist. Social embarrassment, total ignorance, and a generalized dread of rejection all seem too risky. The average woman would embarrass the average guy more frequently than not if he politely approached her to start a discussion. In today's society, approaching a woman almost invariably ends in rejection, being referred to as a perv, or simply being ignored and socially outcast. Why? Because women often think of men as being either predators or desperate. If they already know a person and want him to get in touch with them, they will be all right. But that is a different story. But for a man to approach an anonymous lady is just not worthwhile. There are too many hazards. The universal fear of rejection, complete ignorance, and social disgrace all seem too perilous. If a male approached a lady respectfully to start a conversation, she would likely humiliate him more often than not. Men have made the decision to just stop engaging in any conduct that enables women to treat them disrespectfully and belittle them. Males have noticed that women's treatment of males has recently deteriorated. They have made the decision to put their name, integrity, and respect before the disdain and denigration that women have shown them. The fact is that women need men, especially the older they get. Men become more attractive when they grow older and wiser. Women lose their attractiveness with every year that passes by. And just by the way, all the women with their unavoidable smartphones use a hell of inventions that only men have made. Or does someone know of any invention made by a woman, even in younger times? If so, there are very few. Marie Curie, for example. The point is, women need men more than men need women. But women have made it so hard for men to even approach them that we now know that around 90% of men don't approach women. Can one even approach a modern woman? People will opt not to approach you after taking one glance at you, much less strike up a discussion, if you don't make yourself seem approachable if you want to be approached. Additionally, modern women present themselves in public as though they were royalty. Men no longer approach women because of how they act in public, which is another factor. They just don't seem particularly accessible in the sense that they send out the message, "Don't bother me," to others. Would a lady approach a man who was always displaying an expression that effectively stated, "Do not come near me"? In no way. The Me Too movement has soured work environments. No-fault divorce has made men marriage shy, and the entitlement attitude has soured the dating game. Then these women complain that chivalry is dead, that they'll end up an old maid, and that the glass ceiling at work is getting lower. As Jack Nicholson said in the first Batman movie, "Better think about the future." You get what I mean, right? Yet they continue to cheat on guys who already have all they desire. Men are now starting to wake up and comprehend all of this. Guys don't have time to squander on women who make their interactions pointless. Women don't appear to be aware of how essentially rigged the game is for guys. Men will also no longer engage in accepting the unwelcoming attitudes of women. The whole ordeal is just not worth the effort anymore. There are exceptions to the rule, but they're pretty rare in general. The modern woman is egocentric, entitled, and emits too much masculine energy to even bother courting, and even worse, marrying. Do your own stuff, guys, and work on yourself in the end. If something worthy comes your way, vet her accordingly and maybe plan something long-term. Thanks for watching The Circle of Kings. As always, we're looking forward to your support. So please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with everything all kings like yourself need to know.